Okay, so now we have a application called Home Store, and when we run it we get to see some products, but those products are coming from our mock database. And so right now what we're going to do is change things around. First of all, we're going to create a database within our project, and then we will hook that up. We'll get rid of all of this and hook it up so that we can use our database. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about how to create a database. So if you go under app data, you see that there's an app data folder in our application. So that's where the data is stored. And what we're using here, what we usually use, I mean, you can use other things, but Microsoft has integrated SQL Server into this Visual Studio development environment. So it's very easy to add a SQL Server database through Visual Studio. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to be using SQL Server. SQL Server is just another type of database manager, just like Oracle or MySQL or something like that. So the way to get some data going is to right-click on App Data. So I'll right-click and say Add. And now down here, because I've done this recently, it does say SQL Server Database. Let's say that you don't see that, and let's open, just say New Item. We're adding a new item. Just by virtue of having App Data, that folder highlighted, it knows that these are some possibilities that we might want there. So we are going to choose SQL Server Database. Now what's going to happen is that database is going to get saved into a file with an extension of MDF. So that's how a SQL Server database is stored in file format. So I'm going to call this, a lot of times we'll just call the database the same thing as the application. So I'm going to call it Home Store. I'm going to keep it all one word like this. And then it will, MDF.mdf, but if we don't add that, I'm sure it would add that for us. And so we'll click Add. And now under App Data, we see Home Store MDF. Now, if we have a database, we want to go in and do some things with it. What we want to use, what's very easy, and it's this is how we can manipulate everything within our database easily through Visual Studio, is to use what's called the Server Explorer. So if you don't see a little tab over here on the left that says Server Explorer, look under, click on View, and then you can see Server Explorer. So go ahead and open that up, and then I'm going to pin it so that it stays there. Oh, I guess I unpinned it maybe. So okay, there, it's pinned. It should be like that so that we can get to it whenever we want to here. So you see that over here on the left under Server Explorer, under Data Connections, you see our homestore.mdf. So that's exactly what we want. We want to be able to access that over here in the Server Explorer. So let's open up this MDF, and we see tables. So tables within a database is where we store our data. So that's where what we want to do is create a couple of tables. If I try to open that up, there's nothing under there. So there's no tables in there yet. So we're going to create a new table. So right click on the tables folder and say Add New Table. Not sure why it's taking so long. Let me do it again. Okay, it worked that time, so maybe it didn't know that I clicked on it. Sorry about that. Okay, so here we see, this is the, we're seeing actually SQL Server development environment right here, where we can create different things and we can write SQL. So here's how it works when we create a table within SQL Server. We are actually going to name it, and it's kind of a weird interface. It's been around for years and years, ever since the 90s when I was working with it, and they haven't really updated it as far as made it more user-friendly, but you can't just say save it with a certain name. So I'm going to go down here and say, after create table, I'm going to say the name of the table that I want it to be. Now we want a table that holds the products and a table that holds the categories. So I'm going to first of all click on the products table. I'm going to call it product. Let me think here. I always have to think. Do we want to call it products or product? I think, yeah, we're going to call it products with an S afterwards. Okay, so we'll call it products. So put that there for the name here, so that when we do run this SQL, it will be called products. If we forget to do that and we go ahead and run it, which eventually, once we get this SQL like we like it, we're going to come up here and click on the update. If we do that without having changed the name down here, then it's not going to have the right name. So change that first. Now up here, what we can do is add the different fields that we want within our table. You know, the columns, you might think of it. And so I'm going to first of all look at this first column. It does start with an ID already in there. We do want to always have a primary key, which would be a unique identifier for each of the records. So we do want that, but we usually call our primary key the name of the entity with ID afterwards. So I'm going to call this product ID. And yes, it will be an integer type. And then I can go on and add some more things, but before I go on, this primary key, and it does know it's a primary key here, we need to do a little something here to make it behave like we want to. When our application is adding in new products into this table, when a new product comes along, the question is, how is this product ID going to be determined? You know, is your code going to say, okay, find out what the last product ID is, add 1 to it, and that's going to be your new product ID? You know, you could go through all of that, but there's an easier way, and so here's what we do. Highlight that, and then let's go down to the right bottom and look at the properties window. Now what you want to do is find this identity specification. Now it is an identity, a primary key is an identity, but they use these words to do what we're getting ready to do. So go ahead and open up identity specification and see where it says is identity false. Well, again, it is an identity, and of course we would want it to be an identity, but by saying true here, it does more than just say that it's a primary key. It says that it's an identity, but that the numbers are going to be taken care of for us automatically. That here we can say which one we want, or which number we want to start with. Here we're saying we want to start with 1, and then we want to increment it by 1 each time we add a new product. So by going from this being false to true, and you see there was the 1 and the 1, and you can change that if you want, but we usually leave it like that, then that's going to give us the behavior that we want. So make sure you do that. Now you don't see much difference, you don't see any difference over here, but you do see that that got put in there for us, and so that's what we're going to need to have in there if we want this behavior. Okay, so we have the product ID. Now let's go ahead and put some other things in here. We want the product name. We're just going to call it name here. And what data type is it? Now in SQL Server, our data types are different. We don't have a data type called string. We have these char, CH or char. I call it char since it's beginning of character. Like if we have char 10, that means it's like a string, and there are exactly 10 characters in the string. And if the string would happen to not have 10 characters, then there'd still be enough space saved in order for 10 characters to be put in there. So enough space is set aside for 10 characters, no matter whether each of the names was 10 characters or not. Now, if that's the way we were going, we'd probably want to up that number from 10 because our name might be longer than that. But there's more things we can do here too. If we put an N in front of it, all that does is say, same thing, it's going to be like a string value and 10 characters long. It'll every record will save enough space to have 10 characters there for that column. And but the N just means that we're using Unicode characters. So there's an ASCII code, which I don't know if you all have heard of that or not, but those are just the American symbols, what we're used to, A, B, C, D, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and kind of the basic symbols. But there's other symbols in other languages that we don't ever use, like the E with the accent above it, and some different characters like that. So if you want to be open to being able to use those different characters, then you put the N in front, because you're saying that we're not going to be sticking to just the American characters within that ASCII table, but we're going to allow to have any other kind of characters that are possible within the broader set of what's called the Unicode characters. Okay, so we usually will just go ahead and put the N in front of it, saying so that we're not limiting ourselves to just American characters. Now there's one more thing that we can do, and we usually do this, and we'll put VAR after the N but before the CHAR. Now if we still leave this as 10 here, what this does, it does the same thing. It says it's going to be a string, and we can use any of the characters from the Unicode table. But the other thing is that by putting var in there, it's not going to save space for 10 characters if once we create a new record, if the whatever that string is, if it's not 10 characters long, then it wouldn't set aside all of that space for 10 characters, but just only the amount of space that it needs. So this sets up the database to do that, to not set aside space for 10 if for a particular record there's not a full 10 characters. So usually what we're doing for a string, we would do n varchar, let's see, I don't remember what, I think I put 50 on the notes here, but thinking of the name of a product, how long that name should be, in case there's some descriptions kind of part of the name, like I don't know, sometimes the name could get pretty long if there's a lot of descriptions within the name itself, then it could go up to 50. So we'll do that. And do we want to allow nulls? We only want to allow nulls if we can live with that, and there's no way we would want to have a product that doesn't have a name. So I'm going to take off that allow nulls there. Okay, now we're going to add, we're going to take a look. I'm going to open up this product here, over here on the right, so that we can see what all is in there. And so we'll look over here on the right, and then put everything that matches up with that into here for our database table schema. So we have product ID, we have name. Let's put brand in here now, and I'll just copy this nvarchar and put it in there too. Now description, and I'll do, see, I was thinking we might need more for that, so I put 500. That might be more than we would need, but it's better to have enough, have too much than not enough. Okay, description. Now image path, that's where we're going to be saving the location of an image that we would use eventually. That one, let's just go with nvarchar 50. I'll just copy and paste here. Oh, now back to these brands, and it's up to you once we're past the really important information whether you want to allow nulls or not. Let's just keep it easy. Let's just say, yeah, let's say we're going to fill everything in, but it really doesn't matter there. Okay, now we're down to price. Price, remember that we said that in our application the price is a decimal value here. Oops, I clicked on that on the right and it brought up this window which I didn't want. Anyway, it's a decimal value. So you would think here for price we're going to say decimal, and we are. Thing is though, with decimal there are some parameters there that you pick. I'm going to choose this one and show you how to be able to look and see what those mean. Let me see. I think you can highlight it. Can you highlight it? And no. Okay, I'll tell you how you can find that out. If you don't know, I can tell you right now, but I just want to show you where to find it so that if you forget, you can come and find it yourself. You see the 18 and the 0 there. Down here in the properties window, you see the 18. Did I say 18 and 0? 18 and 0. Here's an 18 and here's the 0. 18 is the precision. Now, what does that mean? Well, if you highlight that, it tells you what it is down here. It says, for numeric data, the maximum number of decimal digits that can be stored in, let's see, move this so that I can read the whole thing, that can be stored in this database object. Maximum number of decimal digits. Okay, so that's including not just the dollar amount, but the pennies amount too. So if we have 18, that would be a really big number, you know, a lot of digits there. I'm thinking, you know, $1 million, we probably won't even have a value that's even that high. So even if we just say 10 here, that's going to be plenty of digits there for overall. Okay, but now let's look down here. For this 0 here, it says scale, and again you might think, what's that? And so you can read here, and it says for numeric data, the maximum number of decimal digits that can be stored. Okay, so that's the decimal digits, what's past the decimal point. Well, since this is currency, we know that we're not going to have anything past pennies. So 2 is going to be all we would need. Now, if we, and since we are going to be having different products in here that might have, you know, a value to the nearest penny, then we'll just go ahead and want to make sure we have that scale set as 2. But if we were dealing with cars and we're not going to have anything where we mention any pennies and we have everything to the whole number, well then you know, we would probably then, you know, just put 0 there. But here by saying 10 and 2 here, that means that 10 overall characters we can have, and 2 of them are going to be on the right side of the decimal point. Okay, now going back to see what else we need here. Category ID. That's going to be the foreign key that goes to our category table. So I'll say category ID. And that's going to be an integer. And we won't allow nulls on that. Now you might think, okay, here's another one, category, after that. But remember, category, that's the navigational property. If we look this up here, we see that's that we put virtual in front of it. And what's going to happen is we're going to then be able to have access to the corresponding category in the categories table. So we've set that up that way. We're saying then that each product could have then not only a category ID, but all of the information that is actually stored in that particular category object. So anyway, that's the navigational property, and we don't have to put that in because that entity framework finds that for us. So this is all we would need, and that's what we've got. And now we need to, we might think it's there and it's saved, but actually as we've been adding things up here, all that's been happening is this SQL has been generated for us. Okay, so this is the SQL that's going to actually run on the database and at the database and create the actual tables. So we have to get that to run. So here's where this is just kind of just the weird interface. We have to know to go up here to this update button. And so click update, and then it's going to say, do you want to generate the script and save it in a file, or do you want to actually update the database? We want the database to be, we want this SQL to be run and the database to be updated. So we're going to choose update database. And down here, we should be able to find what it's saying is done, and it's saying, looks like it's creating the database script, and then it's executing it, and the update completed successfully. Let's go over here. If you look over to the left under tables, you see, well, I don't see a table there. Well, another problem with this interface is when a new table is created, this Server Explorer doesn't get refreshed. So you're going to have to click on this refresh button here, and then you'll see that there is that table called products under there. Okay, so we're going to do the very same thing for the categories table. So I'm going to right click on tables, say add new table. Down here, I'm going to call this, get rid of the DBO table and call it categories. And come up here, and the primary key will be called category ID, and it's an integer, but again it's already set as a primary key, and it says primary key here, but we want it to be updated automatically. We want it to start with 1, and then every time we add a new record in there, we want this this primary key to have a new value. So again, we're going to highlight that, come down here to the properties window, and look under identity specification, and open that up. It says is identity false, and as I say, these semantics are a little messed up because a primary key is going to be the identity, but what they mean by is identity is it an identity that keeps getting updated automatically? So we want to say yes, make that true, which means that we're going to start with 1 and increase by 1 each time. Okay, now I'm going to go to over here to the right, open up the category class so we can see what's in there. All we have besides the category ID is the category name, so I'll put that in here. And I don't remember what I put in the notes, but in varchar, I'll put 50, even though we probably won't need that much, but since it's varchar, it's not going to waste a bunch of space. I'll take that off. Now again, here you might think, well, here's this other property that's called products, but again, that's the navigational property that we put in here so that the entity framework knows how these two tables relate to each other. So we don't have to put anything into that. So that's all we need. We look down here and see, yeah, this is the SQL we want to run. So go up here to update and click update, and then say update database. I'm looking down here. Let's see. Looks like it has gone and done all of this, and it says update completed successfully. So again, we go back up here. Hasn't refreshed. Server Explorer needs to be refreshed, so I'll click that, and now we have categories. So we've got the categories table and the products table. Now let's learn how to put information into those tables. So we're going to just kind of type a few things in just so that there'll be something in there for our application to access. So let's go to the products table here, and I'm going to right click on products. And here you see the options here. You can add a new table, so create a new query, and so on. If you want to get back to, let's say that here when I created my products table, say that tab got closed down, but I wanted to pull it back up, but because I want to maybe change the way that the table is defined, then I could say open table definition, and that brings that back up, and then you can make changes. Okay, but what we want to do if we want to add data in there is we want to say show table data, and that's actually going to open up the table and let us just start putting information in there. So I'm going to choose that, and here we have, looks like there's no records in there yet, and we can just start typing things in. Now you might think that you'd start here and that you would type a 1 in here, and notice it's not going to let you put anything in there. The reason why is that's the column that's set as that identity that's automatically updated for you. So we would leave that blank. It's going to update it and put it in there when we need it. So I'm going to open up our notepad. This was in Notepad. I had downloaded that code for Home Store, and it had, you know, some data in here. So what I have in my example, I just have in here in this in case you want to just copy and paste some things. So I'm going to copy that. Let me make this a little smaller here. So that it doesn't, okay. Okay, make this a little bit more room here. Okay, so I have a ceiling fan. It's going to be the brand Harbor Breeze. So we could go ahead and put a description in here. Oh, I guess we need to because I said it does not allow nulls. Okay, so okay. A nice ceiling fan. Of course, we would have something different. Oh, I really should have. You know what? Well, I'm wishing now that I had let some of these be null so that we don't have to type everything in. But I was going to say we could go back. Sometimes there's weird things that happen when we start. This might be a good thing to show you, because there are different, if we would say go down here, see that there's this no row is updated because I wanted to get out of it, and it says correct the errors or retry. I wanted to get out of it, and so I just tried to click out of it, and this is what it gave me. So here's what I'm going to try, clicking escape. Okay, so I clicked escape and that got rid of it. So try to remember that if you get in the middle and start typing something in and then you don't want that and you want to just get out of that whole data entry process, just hit escape. So now that escape has been hit, I'm going to go back in here and let's just change this a little bit so that we can allow nulls for description, image path. Okay, that'll help us a little bit so that we don't have to be typing a bunch of stuff in. Now I changed that there, but if we change that there, it doesn't get saved automatically. We have to then, it did go ahead and update this SQL down here. We're going to have to go up and update it up here and say update database. And so that should soon be okay. So now I'll come back to here and let's pull up that show table data again. So right click, show table data. So we're back to this, but now I'm going to get to be able to leave some of this null. So ceiling fan is the name, and sometimes this happens. See, it was null in there, and I just based on, I think I clicked in there at the end before I started typing, and see how it didn't take that NUL out of there. So if you click on it and it's all still selected, then when you type ceiling fan, it's going to, anyway, just watch that. Sometimes that NUL gets stuck in the front and you have to just get rid of it yourselves there. So, but okay, Harbor Breeze, and I go back to here. See here, null is highlighted. So if I paste Harbor Breeze in there now, then that null gets totally replaced with Harbor Breeze. And I'll leave the description and the image path empty, and price, let's put in $110.98. Now notice that when we have been typing all of this, you see these little red icons here. Oh, I need to put a category ID. Let's put 2 in there. This is saying, if you hover over it here, it says it's not been changed yet. So it's just a reminder that even though you have put the information in here, the table doesn't actually have that information in there until we go to the next line or hit enter, I believe, too. So I'm going to just go to the next line. See, I went to the next line. Those red exclamation marks are gone, which means now the data is really in there. Okay, and I think, as I said, if you hit enter, I think it goes away too. So there's some more things. So I'm going to put in hammer again. Come back in here and see if I double click like that. See, then if I copy something in there, paste something in there, you see what's going to happen. The NULL is still going to be there, and my, you know, see, the NULL was there. So again, make sure null is highlighted like that before you copy, and then everything will get covered over there. Okay, let's see here. My brand $12.95. And it's category 3. This time I'm going to hit enter and see that worked too. Now we'll put in a box of nails. Okay, and I just I accidentally clicked. I wanted to click on this null here, but I clicked up above the My Brand, and it says, wait a second, you can't go back to this other row. You haven't finished this row, and I really hadn't meant to. So just, these are these kind of weird messages that you get. So say, okay, yeah, I know. Go back here, make sure you click on this row and type that in. And $4.95. I did it again. I just accidentally clicked on the wrong one. So this is just how kind of bad the interface is. You just get used to those weird things coming up that kind of sometimes might scare you until you get to be comfortable with doing this. Okay, so those are the only 3 we need to put in. So I'm going to hit enter. Now all of those are in there. Okay, so all of the data is in there, and that's good. Now we're going to put in some stuff for categories. So I'm going to right click on categories, show table data, and let's see, hardware, lighting, and tools. So hardware, lighting, and tools. Now what I didn't mention the last when we did products, maybe you noticed it, as we've typed new things in, this primary key gets updated automatically. So it started with 1 and then a 2, 3, and same thing for the products. Now I was going to mention this, and so now you'll see this. Don't worry if you see that these product IDs, instead of going 1, 2, 3, it's 2, 3, 6, because every time I showed you something, how maybe there was a problem with the interface and it gave me an error and I had to say, okay, let's get out of it and try it again. Every time it gives you that error, it's actually usually used up one of those product IDs. So when you do it again, then it's going to go on to a new product ID, add 1 to it. So it looks like, I messed up on that first row, so that got used up and not used again, so there's not a product ID of a 1. Then I put the 2 and the 3 in there, and then for the 4 and the 5, those were the 2 times I accidentally clicked on the wrong line. And so for 4, I was typing something in for 4 and clicked on the wrong line. It didn't like that, and so then it said, okay, I'm not using 4 again. Then it went up to 5, and then I clicked on the wrong line again, and again it said, okay, I'm not using 5 anymore, and it went up to 6. So don't worry, at least it's never going to have the same the same primary key, but it's just that things like that happen. Or if later in your application you go back and you delete one of these, whether you do it through here or actually within the application, then that, like if we deleted 3 right here, which we won't, but by the way, I think you can just hit delete right there and it would delete. But if we did delete something this way or through the application, then 3 is not ever going to be used for a product ID again. Okay, so we have information in here for our products and for our categories. So that's good. So now we really have everything we need for our database. So I'm just going to close all of this out, and we know that we have everything okay. And anytime you want, you can still come to back over here to the Server Explorer and see what's in there and add new things if you want to. There's lots of things you can do. If you've taken the database management class, you probably know about stored procedures and views and so on. Lots of stuff you can do. And again, even though this is Visual Studio, Microsoft has given us the ability to do a lot of this functionality for SQL Server within Visual Studio. You can also use what's called SQL Server Management Studio, and that's where you go in and just do everything for the database and directly that way. But it looks a whole lot like this. It's just that you don't have your project over here on the right to look at. So you probably really just might as well always go ahead and do it here within Visual Studio. Okay, so we have all of that right. So now we've got to go back to our application and see what we can do, because remember, as it stands now, we have an inject saying to put the mock database in there, so that anytime our application is trying to do something with something that implements iProduct repository, it's going to put in this mock data. We want to change that. Okay, so we're going to be getting rid of all of this. I might go ahead and get rid of this now, just so, because we know this is going to happen soon. We'll get rid of it. There's different ways you can comment things out. I don't know if you know about this, the right slash and asterisk, and then asterisk right slash will like comment something out, and then in between the asterisk, the slash asterisk and the asterisk slash, everything there gets commented out. Or you can also, you could just get rid of it. I don't need to use it anymore. Or you can also select this and then go up in here and say, find the right menu thing to comment that out. But anyway, I'm just going to leave it at that. And here's the big question though now, is what we're going to put in here. We need to have an inject say what we should be using for this iProduct repository. Okay, so now at this point, let me show you this document that I have out there on Canvas. It Oh, that's not it. Thought I had it up here for you. I did, but let me go here and find it here. It's called Classes for Database Access. At this point, hopefully you're feeling really okay about everything so far. This is the point where you might get a little confused because there's a few little steps involved. So what I wanted you to know before we even start talking about it is you're always going to have access to this document. I'm going to go ahead and open it, download it, and open it so you can see what's in there. Even for a test, I let you see it for the test. This class is used in the repository pattern. Okay, now remember we have something right now so far in our application called iProduct Repository. So this is saying here's what goes under, and I have blank spaces for whatever our entity is. Okay, so when I have an iProduct repository, I have public interface iProduct repository, and we'll look back here and double check on this, but in that iProduct repository that we already have in our application, we have this as the as we're setting a property, and the property, and again here these blanks, we'll put the word, since the entity is the one we're working with right now, we'll put the word product into this blank line. So in here we're going to have IEnumerable, and then product will go in these inside these braces here, and then product goes in here on the next to it, but notice there's an S after there, so that's telling you, it's going to be the plural of whatever your entity is. So basically, when you go to hook something up to a database, an application up to a database, you can basically literally take all of these and just decide what are your entities, and then just into the blank lines type in your entity, and then you'll have what you need. Okay, because there is a lot of syntax that you'd have to worry about and remember and so on. Don't forget though, if you do use this and copy and paste, you might rather just not copy and paste, but just take a look and then type it yourself. But if you do copy and paste, make sure you realize that you'll always have to put your own project name in there. So anyway, that's what we already have, is this iProduct repository. And let me go ahead and let's look at that here. And under models, we have iProduct repository. And sure enough, we have this. Now, the one thing I have in this, the one thing I have in this document that I just showed you is we're only working with one database. One table. So we have two tables in here. So not only do I have in this repository, not only do I have a property called products, I'm also going to have a property called categories that has a bunch of categories. So I would take all of this that you see here on this document and put it in here, and if it's not already in there, but it was already in there for us, and then put all of the entities that you need in there. Okay, but now look here, besides this interface here, there's two other things. So let me talk about here. This is the EF blah 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 repository. That's going to be the implementation for your interface. So if we have an iProduct repository, we're going to also have an EF product repository. And here's how it's going to look. And again, we would just put the entity name in for these blank lines. So we'd have, it's going to be called EF product repository, and it implements, we have that colon, so that means it implements the iProduct repository. And you have all of this stuff in here, and you don't have to remember the syntax. You can just type it by looking or copy and paste. But here's where we need to talk about this third little class that's very important if we're using the entity framework. It's called the context class. And we have to create that up here. I mean, here's where it's listed. I have it listed up here in the document. Okay, it's called EFDB context, and we put this stuff in. Again, you know that wherever the blank line is, you put your entity. So I'm going to have something called EFDB context, and I'm going to have, and we need to make sure when we create it, we have it implementing this DB context that is already a class that's already created for us by the entity framework. So if we don't put that in there, then our context class is not going to work as we need it to. So don't forget to put that in there. And then you put this in here. So now I go back. Let's go back to our application. And I'll try to move this a little bit so that we can have all of this open at the same time here. So let's go and create the EFDB context class, and we'll create it underneath the models folder again. Okay, so right click on models, add a class called EFDB context. Notice the EFDB context, the B isn't it isn't capitalized. Now it doesn't matter what we call our context class, but especially here for where you're talking about what gets what it's inheriting from. Yeah, it's inheriting from this. We need to make sure that the B isn't capitalized, because I don't think it will recognize it. So anyway, we'll usually call this EFDB context with the B not capitalized. Okay, so EFDB context. Okay, and what are we going to make it look like? We're going to use what we see over here on the left. We're going to put, first of all, not forget to say it inherits. And when I first talked about this line here just a few minutes ago, hopefully I didn't say it implements this. I might have said implements because a lot of times we use that colon for implement. So I don't remember what I said, but it's different in this case. We're not implementing an interface. It's just actually inheriting from this class called DB context. Okay, and then we just do public DB set, and then we put in what our entity is. So we have a product, and then we're going to call that products because we see the S here, and then we have the get and set. So products, now it doesn't like this, and you do want to make sure you don't capitalize the B again, but you can do show potential fixes. You can tell up here it doesn't recognize this DB context because we don't have the right using statements in. So I can say show potential fixes here, and it's this system.data.entity that we need up there. So when we do that, now this is fine, and it knows now what a DB set is. So this DB set is another collection. It's meaning it's a collection of products, but it's a special entity framework thing. Now we installed entity framework back when we set up our application, if you remember. So that's good, because if we hadn't installed entity framework, then I don't think this would be found. A lot of things wouldn't work right. So make sure that you already have entity framework installed before you try to be doing all of this. Okay, so we have that, but I'm going to also add in the one for category. Now here's where, if you literally use this, you would put category and then an S at the end. It would look like this, right? Categories. But I mean, it doesn't literally have to be that. It's just what I mean with that S at the end of that blank is to make it as the plural. So, we wouldn't usually do that. We would do that. But it's funny sometimes, especially before a while back when Code First, when we were doing Code First, in a few, not lately, but in some earlier versions of Visual Studio, what it would do is like it would try to pluralize these anything for us, and so it would always just put an S at the end of the and not do what English says is the plural of this. Anyway, so just make sure you put the plural there. So we're good with this context now. Now, if you look in the notes, you'll see here where I've explained this. And so I don't have the notes pulled up here, so I don't think I'm going to show them to you, but I'm going to talk and tell you what's in the notes here. So first of all, I have this circled saying, please make sure you don't forget to inherit from DB context. But then I have some arrows, and I've got an arrow to this product here and another arrow to the products. And here's what the notes say. The entity framework will use the product model to represent rows in the products table. So this is like the entity framework. You can kind of see it as the glue that holds the database together with your entity objects. And so this is the glue right here. It says my product objects in my application actually correlate with records in this table. Okay? And it's the same thing with this. This is saying my category objects correlate with rows or records in my categories table. So that's important. That's what our context class does, is it glues our objects together with the database tables. Okay, so we have that. Let's go ahead, even though in the notes I don't have that yet, but since we already have this up here, let's go ahead and create this EF product repository. So I'm going to right click models, add class EF product repository. Let's see, do I have any of that code? No, I didn't. None of this code did I save for you to copy and paste. So we'll just type it in ourselves here. I'm trying to move this over a bit here. I can't, sorry. Okay, so just trying to, let me see if I can do this. There we go. Move that over so we can see all of this document on the left. Okay, so we have a class called EF Product Repository. Notice what this tells us, that we need to put on the end that it implements the iProduct repository. That's important because that's the whole reason we even are putting this in here, is this is finally our implementation of our product repository, our interface there. So okay, so iProduct repository. It doesn't see it, but that's because we need a using statement. So let's go ahead and show potential fixes. And oh, that's not why. Okay, yeah, I was expecting it. Oh yeah, it's just going to give us a using statement for models, but in this case, that's not the problem. that's not the problem because we're actually already in the models folder, so it would be finding it if it were, you know, looking for it. But the reason it doesn't like it here, you can show, it says EF product repository does not implement this interface. Remember, for an implementation of the interface, it's got to have the very same properties and methods that the interface has. So remember, the interface has, go back to here, it's got these two properties. And if our implementation does not have those two properties, then we're out of luck. It's not going to get to be used for that. So we'll put that in there, but let's see, we need to do a little bit different here. So yeah, so far it still doesn't quite like it because we really haven't, it's not really doing what it needs to do yet. So let's go back over here and see if I'm going to try just to, so that I don't have to type this, but I don't know if it's going to be in the right format here. Oops, I'm going to copy all of this here. Just getting lazy, I guess. Okay. Well, okay, something messed up there. Yeah, let me just get the stuff inside this class here. And I'm going to just get rid of that. I just put that in there to show you, but we definitely do need to, when we're done, make sure that there is a property called products and a property called categories. But we need to do it in a special way here if it's going to work. Okay, so the first thing is saying, okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use our context file that we just created to create a context object. Then, now here's where we would say IEnumerable product, and we call it products. So that's what we had just a second ago, but the difference is we're returning, we're going to return what we get from this context file. So the context file, and this is where we kind of start getting a little complicated, but the context file, remember, is the one that goes out and gets the data. And so here it's just saying actually return some products. Go use our entity framework to figure out which tables to look in and then return something from that. And what are we returning? We're returning the products property. Okay, because remember, context also had a products property. So we've got that, and I'm going to do the same thing. We don't need to create another context file, but we just needed to create the categories property. Categories, and categories. And notice that line has gone away. So now it's happy. It knows that yes, we are returning some valid properties called products and categories. And so now that will be what we need. Okay, so we've actually now put all three of these. We did the EFDB context. We already had the repository, the interface abstract repository, and then we've just done this EF product repository. So that's set up for good things to happen, but we still have just another couple of things. We're almost done. It's really, really close. We need to, so far though, we need to tell the application where to find this database. So if you, we could say, well, we know where it is. The database is right inside the project itself. It's right under here under app data, right? Well, and sometimes it is within the project itself under app data, but sometimes it's on a different server in a different country than where the web server is, okay? So it's not always there. So the next thing we need is to be able to put into there's a setting file called web.config. We need to put what's called a connection string in there that tells the application where to find the data. Okay, now what we would do is go find web config, and now here's the problem. There's two web configs. See this web config here down at the very bottom? That's under the root directory, okay, root folder. But there's also a web config here that's under the views. So if I close up the views, you don't see it anymore. Open up the views, there's that web config. That's not the one you want, okay? So you don't want that one. You want this one way down here at the very bottom. So go ahead and click on that, and you see all of this open. This is just stuff that needs to be there, and you don't need to worry about what all of that is. But we need to add our connection string there. Now, opening up our notepad here, I've put the connection string in here, so you can copy that, and I'll put it in there first before we talk about it. So copy it in there. Now it doesn't say here, but in the notes it says to go and put it under when config sections under there. So see how there's this open config sections and end config sections. Put it under there. Now there's some other places you could put it, but the trouble is you can't put it you need to make sure you don't put it too far past some other stuff here, or it won't work. So I just kind of say just try to get into the habit of looking for that config sections and putting it in there, so that you know at least it's going to be there when some other stuff comes up down below. So just copy that in there. Now let's look and see, what does this connection string, we see a tag that says, okay, here comes some connection strings. We're only going to have one connection string, and we add one. Notice here, this is the name of our context, and that's important. Our context was the glue that held the objects together with our database, and it did talk about which tables go together with our objects, but it said nothing about where to find the database. So here we're adding on to that and saying where to go find it. What this says, and you won't ever have to come up with this yourself, I'll always give this to you, but this here says, yeah, this is, in this case, it is local, it's under app start. Okay, so that's just the way we have to put that in order for it to look for the data right there within the project. Initial catalog, that means the initial database. We call the database home store, so we just call it home store. Attach DB file name, again, it just has to be that way if it's going to work. This data directory inside those pipes basically is pointing it to that app data folder that we had the actual data in. It's pointing to this data there. Okay, so that's what that is. And then what's it called? Underneath app data, it's called homestore.mdf. So we have homestore.mdf. And then a couple of other few things here. So, you know, you'll always have something to copy and paste in there, but you just want to make sure to customize it for your application. Make sure this is the name of your context file, and usually you'll be naming your context file that, EFDB context. And then make sure that whatever the name of your database is goes there, and then also goes here. Okay? So we have that, and again, make sure you don't put that in this web config, but put it in this bottom web config. So there it is. I'm going to save it. Okay, so we're done with that. We have our implementation. So now last step is to set up Ninject to use our new implementation for that that abstract repository. Let's look one more time. We're really close, so hopefully you're not too tired of this, but we're really close. Looking here, back here in our controller, we see that when this application is run, Visual Studio, or the actual application itself, is going to be looking for something to get passed in, which is an instance of this interface, of the repository interface. And whatever gets passed in, it's going to be some implementation of the interface. We want to set an inject up to pass in not that mock data, but the EF product repository. So anyway, so that gets this thing called repository gets set to whatever that implementation is that gets passed in. Then in the list method, we're going to take a look at what's in the repository, what just got passed in, right? And remember, that's the repository that has two properties. One property called products, which is a list of products, and one property called categories, which is a list of categories. So all we have to do is refer to this repository, say repository.products, and it's going to go find that. So anyway, that's what's happening. But so our last step then is just to go to an inject dependency resolver and get rid of this mock code and put something in more like what we're used to seeing in there in inject. And so here we have this. Copy that, paste this here, and I already have this filled out. Usually, you have to put the interface name there and the implementation there, but I already have this filled out for you. So we want to bind the EF product repository to the I product repository instead of using this mock data, so that therefore when this application starts up, it'll go and say, where do I find the data? It goes and looks in web config and says, oh, okay, I see here. I'm supposed to look within my local project, and I'm supposed to look inside something called homestore.mdf, and then the entity, the context, then takes it from there. Okay, so let's see, anything else that we need to do? I think that's it. Except what I wanted to do so that we can see the navigational properties take effect. I had those products in there, and the products in the database, and I had them all have a category ID, but I also have a category table with actually category names. So the last thing I want to do before we try to run this is go to this view here for this list, and let's add one more thing here besides the name and the price. Let's add P dot, and what we want is we want the category name. Okay, but now remember how it's going to get the category name. It doesn't have a category name property in the products model class, right? But it does have a property called category, which is that navigational property. And so because we set it up that way, that within each product it's going to have that entire category coming along with it, because we made that navigational property. And so we're going to look at that entire category and pull something out of there. So now I'll say dot category name. And so now it's going to not only give the name and the price, but it's going to look up into, the category table and find what's the name of that category with the particular category ID of that product. Okay, so now we're finally ready to run this. Let's hope it works. Okay, there's a problem. What? There's already an open data reader associated. Okay, now I have a thought. I've not seen that. If I can't figure this out real quick, I'll stop the video and figure it out. But let's see. Sometimes SQL Server is weird where it opens a connection and unless all the connections get closed out, it's not going to work right. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong in the data here. I mean, in the so what I did here in the code, but I'm just going to kind of close all of this up. Yeah, so see now the home store MDF, now it also recognizes it as EFDB context, which is true. Well, let me try to run this again. Some kind of connection was up there. What I would probably do next if this doesn't work is save this and then open it up again, close it out and open it up again, because maybe when I was creating the database some connection got opened and didn't get closed or something. But let me just see if this might work. And maybe I have a mistake in here somewhere, so I'm going to have to take a look real quick. And so I'm going to pause this here and come up with the solution. Let's see. It does say, let's just do this together. An error occurred while executing this command. See the inner exception for details. So let's view the details here. An error occurred. Let's see, inner exception. Okay, I thought it would have more in there. Oh, inner exception here. Okay, I guess this is all that it's got in there. Already an open data reader associated with this command, which must be closed. So that really does make me think that there's just some connection open. So I'm going to go ahead and do this before pausing, just in case that's it. And normally that doesn't happen. I mean, I just did this a few minutes ago and that didn't happen. So either I just have a typo in there somewhere, which I'll investigate, or maybe this will fix it here. So I'm going to go ahead and open this again here. Home store. It's this one here. I think that I added the stuff to. Okay, highlight catalog controller, run. Okay, let me stop this, figure it out, and I'll be right back. Okay, it didn't take long. I just remembered. It works fine if I took out that statement about the category name. And then I remembered, okay, I remember what it is. Going back to the EF product repository, I brought this up. I did this using that document that we were looking at, right? But remember how we talked about when you use the word virtual on a navigational property, we talked about this way back at the beginning of the semester. It uses lazy loading, in that these extra properties that come along with an object based upon what what it's connected to in another table. Whatever comes along that way, it's not loaded unless you actually tell it to load it. So here is, and it's in the notes, but I was just looking at the and I would not make you, I would remind you if I had you do something like this here on your own. But right here, that's returning the products, but because of lazy loading, it's not returning all of the category information along with it. It would have, each product would have the category ID available, but not have all the category information. So we have to do this dot include category. Okay, so it's saying, hey, don't be lazy. not only return products, but return all of the category information for each product. Okay, so that was something that's not on that chart, that thing that I had over here, but you would just need to know, oh yeah, if I need to do this, then I need to force those extra things to load. So anyway, now let's go back to the view, and I put that back in there, and let's see, now it should run. Okay, so catalog controller, run. Okay, so there it worked. So this time it went and it got the data from the database, and this is a great example. That error that we got where it said a data connection is still open or something like that, when it comes to SQL Server, usually the errors that show up, that what they say don't really a lot of times match the problem. It didn't tell me, oh well, this isn't loaded yet because you didn't include the categories. It doesn't really give you a lot of information. So when it comes to SQL Server and you get these weird little errors like that, just kind of know what, think about what you know and go and make sure you didn't have any typos and whatever, and then, see if you can figure it out that way. But that error didn't really help us at all. But okay, one last thing, and that is this. What if I wanted to display these in order by price? Have them go from lowest to highest. That's usually how I order products when I'm looking online. And so, we could have an actual little arrow where we have that, people click on the arrow and then choose price, low to high, or something like that. But I just wanted to say, if we're not going that way, but we just want to have a quick way here in our code to have these products be ordered, here's where we can do it, and you're going to see how easy this is. Here we have repository.products. We're passing the product, the list of products, to our list view. All we have to do now, if we want to order by price, we're going to use link.orderby, and then remember we have to do this lambda notation like that. Oh, and I need an extra parentheses because I had one already here at the beginning. So then I need to close out my new parentheses and then keep that one in there. So two there. Okay. Now it looks like system link is already listed there, so it's going to be using link. So you won't have to add that. I thought maybe we'd have to tell it to put in that using statement, but it's already there. So look how easy that is. All we're doing, and this is method notation, which is what I consider the easiest way. Remember, you just chain on these methods after an array or whatever. We used to start with an array here and then say dot order by or dot where or whatever like that. And so that's where you start. You start right here and just start going dot order by. You could put a where clause in there, anything you want there. But now if I run it, it should be put in order. And just so you know, be prepared to do that on a test. Usually I kind of, here it is in terms of it's in order based on price, low to high. And remember, it's an order. We saw it with link. If you want it descending, you would have to say order by descending. Anyway, I want you to know how to put that in there, how to add that link easily, because on the test I might say go ahead and put it, use link to put it in a certain order or to do a certain thing. And even though you learned link last test, I want it to be familiar to you when it comes time for the new test. Okay, that is it. Let me know if you have any questions. Hopefully you can follow along with me on this example, and then you have a lab to do. For the lab, I've kind of laid out the steps pretty clearly, so I think you can follow along there hopefully, but I definitely want you to uh, be able to take applications and hook them up to a database like we learned here today.